You are back with us now on America's Forum. We're glad to have you. I'm J.D. Hayworth.
And I'm John Bachman. Also sticking around with us, Dick Morris, political analyst. We're going to turn our attention to some foreign policy issues. Also going to bring in Pete Hoekstra, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, to discuss the Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine's president says he will not prosecute pro-Russian activists occupying official buildings in two eastern cities if they surrender their weapons. But authorities in Ukraine's capital, Kiev, warned that they are prepared to use force to clear several government buildings that have been seized by pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine. The building was among several government offices seized by those groups on Sunday in an escalation of protests against the interim government in power since the ousting of President Viktor Yanukovych back in February. The Interior Ministry forces were denied permission to control or patrol the city last night when protesters surrounded the headquarters. Quote, "We are persuading them, but could not manage to achieve a full positive result, and we could not leave the territory," said Deputy Commander Yuri Smirnov. Well, Kiev authorities say these actions could give Russia the pretext to an invasion here in this crisis. Ukraine has accepted or accused Russia of stirring up all this activity. Moscow, of course, has denied those accusations.
Kind of a convenient denial. Dick is going to weigh in a second, but we would be remiss if we didn't call in our good friend and my old colleague, Skyping in to join us, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, as you hear about this, quote, unrest in the Ukraine, is this an inside job for the Russians, or is this just that ethnic affinity bubbling up from the body politic?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think the Russians clearly are involved in fomenting the unrest in the Ukraine. You've got a population that is receptive to the message that Russia and Putin that they are delivering. You've got a dysfunctional government running Ukraine. You put that all together, and it's a very good mix of politics and policy for Russia and for Putin.
Well, what about this new government in the Ukraine, Dick? The political dimension of all the unrest and the Russian bear on the doorstep. If you were advising this new Ukrainian government, what would you tell these new leaders to be doing?
I think they have to clear those buildings. I think they should do so with non-lethal force, but it's a matter of showing their national sovereignty. But I want to step back a bit and raise two other questions. One is the commander of NATO yesterday said that he would not rule out deploying American forces in Eastern European countries that are NATO allies. In fact, he specifically mentioned the idea, I believe, of 50,000 NATO forces deployed throughout Eastern Europe. That would activate the whole tripwire philosophy of the Cold War, which is we put our troops there on the front line, not because we thought it could hold back a Russian attack, but because Russia would know that if they attacked, it would mean a nuclear war, because they'd be killing American soldiers. Now, in this case, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, nor is Georgia. But Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, who are the next targets, are NATO members. And that's an interesting thing. The other point I want to make is that there's one huge liquefied natural gas plant that's coming online that's under construction in Houston that will supply a vast amount of the natural gas that Russia exports to Europe, replacing it, killing Russian power in that region. And that comes on tap in 2017. So Putin knows that his days are numbered, and there are 27 other facilities awaiting Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or Department of Energy approval. So Putin is playing a losing hand here, but he's playing it very aggressively, I think in the hopes that he could break up NATO before Russia's power really dims. And I think his next challenge will not be in Ukraine. I think it may be in the Baltic countries, because that is really, it could be in Ukraine, but those Baltic countries could be the way to make NATO seem impotent.
Well, let's go to Pete Hoekstra about the politics of NATO and what Dick is outlining about the tripwire, because you have that very curious situation. Meantime, we know the Russians are massed on the border. NATO saying up to 40,000 Russian troops are right there, camping out beside the Ukraine. What do you think is afoot, Pete?
Well, it's going to be very hard to predict what Putin's going to do, but I think Dick raises a number of issues. Putin is dealing with a losing hand in the long term. That's why he needs to move now and why he's moving aggressively, not only because the opportunity is there, but that opportunity is going to go away as more natural gas facilities, liquefied natural gas facilities come online. But the bottom line here is, and this goes back to the argument that a number of people in Washington have been debating over the last 4 or 5 years. It's an all-of-the-above energy strategy. If the U.S. had employed an all-above energy strategy for the last 5 years, continuing to produce and expand our production of coal, natural gas, and oil and fossil fuels, not only would the U.S. be independent, but Europe would not have been in the predicament that they are in right now. Putting them in Europe from the NATO commander standpoint, it's the right thing to do. The question is exactly where are they going to be deployed? Are they going to be deployed in the Baltic countries? That obviously moves the tripwire very close to the current challenges, the current threat environment. Are they going to be in Germany or whatever? But where are they going to be stationed? And the other question will be, it is one thing for the NATO commander to say there's going to be U.S. troops there somewhere in the future. Are they actually willing to pull that trigger and to put U.S. troops in that environment? That's a whole other question. There's been a lot of bluster against Russia. Obama and Europe, every time they start moving and threatening Russia, they always pull back because Western Europe is so dependent on Russia for natural gas.
Both you gentlemen have raised this specter of American troops, aka NATO troops, and the tripwire notion. But I want to drill down a little bit more. I know it's difficult. You can't exactly pick a date on the calendar. But one thing that I don't think Putin is going to be ensnared by is mission creep. He's got a certain amount of time on the calendar. Pete, your instincts and past intelligence work, when do you think Putin has to put up or shut up in terms of the Ukraine and the other expansion?
Oh, I think he's got plenty of time. I think unrest there is fine for him to achieve his objectives and his ends. He doesn't have instability plays into his hand. He doesn't have to invade Ukraine in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months to secure that. Instability creates a better environment for him. I think he's also going to be looking in the other direction, Azerbaijan, the stands in those types of areas.
Moldova.
He's got plenty of time.
And Dick, do you concur on that?
Yeah, I do. Moldova is another likely target of his. The important thing to bear in mind about this is that Putin can sit there on the border waiting for the Ukraine to unravel on its own, because Ukraine is in such a basket case because it was so looted by the previous Russian-backed president that they're hopelessly in debt, and the IMF is adopting its usual austerity-first approach, which is totally inappropriate to this situation.
So you gentlemen are both telling us...
Let me add just one thing.
Okay, very quickly.
I'm surprised Dick didn't mention it because this is his strong
Got about
suit.
30 seconds, very quickly,
Okay.
Pete.
It's the big thing that's looming on the future in 2017. It's the year before, 2016, when we elect a new president who will be installed in January of 2017.
Valid point. Time, a factor there and a factor here. Pete Hoekstra, we thank you for your insights. Dick Morris, we happy to have you hang around for an extra segment as we shift the focus back here to what's happening at home. Stay with us. America's Forum continues.